everyone knows about all that history and stuff. I mean, come on. I mean, today we're going to talk about how to use history in your games. It's going to be great.
You're not in this video.
What? I'm not in this video? Come on, why not?
DM says you're gonna die, roll a d6. Roll a d6, roll a d6. Na-na-na-na-na. DM says you're gonna...
Hi, and welcome to SRD. I'm Bree.
And I'm Rob.
Today, we're going to discuss taking historical events and using them in your campaigns. A few tips and tricks on how to do that effectively.
Have you ever wanted to take people through a tremendous event like the Titanic sinking or World War II or World War I or any other historical event? We're going to talk about today how you can make that happen.
Speaking of the Titanic sinking, we've done a 50% LARP that was timed with the exact timeline of the Titanic sinking from the time that it hit the iceberg until it went underwater as one of the historical events that we've used. We've also done Moulin Rouge meets Jack the Ripper. What are some that you've done?
Probably the first one that I ever tried was the Great Chicago Fire. Of particular interest to me, when I just started to research that, all of the different theories behind the fire just played right into a Call of Cthulhu scenario like I never would have dreamed. My most recent one, I decided that all of the runes that they recently discovered down in Central America, when they realized that the runes were so much more expansive than what they thought, I thought that is an area that I've got to do something in, and immediately ran with that, and that was a session that I created for Gen Con last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you start looking at historical events, more often than not, you'll find that the truth is normally stranger than fiction. And so a lot of the times these historical events lead for perfect backdrops to campaign scenarios or even one-shot scenarios. One of the things that I want to point out is that taking a historical event and trying to set it to your campaign or to your one-shot or whatever system that you're playing is no different than using campaign settings that are already set up for you, your Eberrons and your Fey runes. It's no different than pulling from those settings. It's just knowing what elements of that historical event or historical time that you're wanting to use and how to effectively put them into your setting. One of the elements that you can pull from is just the time, that place in time, by taking buildings that would have been there, the tone of that time, what the cars would have looked like, just the general setting of that time without using a specific event. The 20s, for example, when you were talking about the Great Chicago Fire, the 20s definitely have a tone to them. There's a definite setting for the 20s. So if you're doing a campaign or a session that's run in the 1920s, there's certain things that you would want to be there and certain things that you would not want to be there. And so that's a good place to start, is looking at the setting. Full Metal Alchemist would be a great example of this. It's a perfect way to take a historical setting and then take a fantasy world and kind of overlay it in a historic setting that actually existed, but to put a completely different spin on it and a completely different story on top of a setting that already existed.
One of the things that I enjoy about taking something like this is making sure that you're incorporating important people at the time, depending on what your situation is, referring back to the Titanic. You've got certain people that are iconic. Jack from the movie is not one of those people, but your captain, the lookout that was in the tower, and obviously the iceberg plays a very important role in all of it. And so those are just those types of iconic aspects of the genre that you don't want to overlook. But then there are some other things that you can try and add in there, because what is it that makes that area interesting to tie into a game session? Is it fun just to put a bunch of people on the Titanic and have them knowing they're going to crash into an iceberg and everyone is either going to die or get really cold? But what is it that makes it fit into your game? That's the question that you have to ask. And so in that scenario, the great ones, they sleep. Where do they sleep? They may be sleeping inside of a giant iceberg, and there may be people trying to crash that ship into that iceberg for a particular reason. For the Great Chicago Fire, I had cultists attempting to call down a comet that was passing over at the time, and is one of the theories of how the fire may have started. So again, like you said, truth can be stranger than fiction often, and sometimes these types of scenarios will just write themselves if you do a little bit of research.
And as far as research goes, know that some of your players are always going to know more than you about whatever time that you're in. So understand that they may call you out on it, just roll with it and be willing to work with your players. There are items from those eras, whether it's weaponry or you say that there's a certain mechanism there or a piece of machinery or something, and they're going to say, nope, that wasn't invented, that wasn't in that setting at that time period. Work with them, find a way around it, but there is always going to be that guy that's going to call you out. Find a way to compromise, because they're probably right if you didn't do your research thoroughly. Also, even though people may know more than you about that subject, also encourage people not to be so tight about the truth behind the history that they don't let go a little and have a little fun with it. As you know, players are going to do what they want, and so if you're trying to stick to an exact historical timeline during a game, it's probably not going to happen that way. And if they aren't afraid to have a little fun with history and the facts, they're probably not going to enjoy a game set in a historical setting.
Well, and to go along with that, history is told by the winners.
It's true.
So who's to say that what we know from that history book is completely accurate? Who's to say what that other person knows, what your player knows from the history book is completely accurate? And when you twist those things around, just subtly twist them so that they create a better story and a more entertaining story for your players, you're close enough to the history, but more importantly, you've added that little extra element of surprise that they don't anticipate, and that's what keeps them hooked into that scenario.
SOD is proud to announce our brand new sponsor, Scabard RPG Campaign Manager, and it's exactly that. You can go there and keep track of all of your NPCs, items, your maps, all of these things that you and your players can both access. If that's something that you need to do to kind of keep things in order, I know I do, I've been using it for years, you can find it down in the link below. If you decide that you like the premium features that are there, if you use our link within the first 3 hours, you get a 20% discount.
Also, when you're talking about history, there are always those dark spots in history. You know, as you said, the winners are the ones that write history. So there may be some parts of history that are uncomfortable to talk about. You know, it always kind of brings to mind World War II and Nazis. World War II can be a very fun campaign setting, and it's hard to have World War II without talking about Nazis. But when you have people playing Nazis, and maybe you have somebody playing Jewish people, you might want to talk to your players in session 0 about how far into role play do you want to get, and where's the line when people become, it's okay that we're playing these roles and then the role play's fine, to where do we cross a line and where does it just become offensive? Know your players, know how far they're going to take that role play, and know when people just aren't okay with it anymore, because you know, even though it's history, you're still at a game and people still have sensibilities and you want to respect those.
Along those same lines, and sometimes you don't have that opportunity for a session 0. A game that I ran for an event last year, I ran the scenario multiple times, and all of the players were playing German soldiers, pre-World War II German soldiers. And we had different motivations assigned to each of them. One of them was a taskmaster drill sergeant, one of them was a cultist, one of them was an undercover Jew who was being blackmailed or by one of the other soldiers. Those were all part of the motivations that I wrote into the characters for that game. And it was amazing to me how every single group that played those characters took those in a different direction. So you never know how that's going to be, but obviously if you see somebody that's taking it a little bit too far, then there are certainly things that you as a game master can do to step in, and again, if you write those certain motivations the right way, I think they can play out the right way, because one of the motivations was for the person that was being blackmailed was to try and figure out how to either take away the status of the person that was blackmailing him or ultimately kill that individual through the scenario.
As a final note, just consider any time that you've used other fictional worlds for campaign settings. Again, people are really passionate about those settings, whether it's from a movie, whether it's from a book, whether it's a D&D campaign setting that they're taking. People love these stories, just as some people are very passionate about historic places, times, and events. So when you take them, don't be afraid to have fun with them, but also remember, try to stay true to the essence of those and just pull pieces from them and then allow your players to give life to them how they see fit. You're just creating a world for them to run with, after all. As a game master, that's what we do, and your players are going to do with it what they want.
Your source books, whether you're wanting to do something for Middle Earth or, as we've mentioned, Eberron or other traditional D&D type of settings, that's no different than reaching into a history book and maybe going to the Middle Ages and the 1920s, the 1940s, or looking at the Dark Ages, or wanting to go back into Roman times. It's all source material. So don't be afraid to look into those areas, see how you can incorporate that into your game and make it your own, because that's when you're going to have the most fun, and when you're having fun, your players are going to have fun.
Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and tell us in the comment section below, have you used any historical events for any of your campaign settings? Let us know. Thanks for stopping by.